see a massive like window in the middle. This is the scene view. This is where you arrange all your game objects and arrange like the lookout of the start of the game.
Yep.
And if you go to the game window, and this is the game window. This is what the cameras in the scene are showing, and this is like how you would test your game. So if you click the play button now, at the top, this will then play the game.
This is just playing the game in editor.
So then you can pause the game as well. And so so you have to like press escape to unlock your mouse.
Yeah.
It mouse is disabled by the game. And then to the right of the pause button, there's a little arrow.
Yeah, I think it's called step.
Yes, that'll go 1 frame.
So as I'm clicking this, you can see like the little health icon particles on the right hand side that are kind of, well, they were disappearing. The particle system's disappeared now. If I unpause, and if I go somewhere where some action's happening, then I can unlock my screen like that. Press pause, and if I keep hammering this step button, it's going to advance frame by frame. And unpause and come back in and get shot to death by this turret. And you just press play again. It comes out of play mode.
So other useful things about the game window is on the top right. There's a stats button.
So this stats button gives you stuff like frames per second, how many triangles and vertices it's currently rendering, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we'll mainly use it for the frames, just to see.
Yeah. So I don't know how easily that comes through because I'm streaming it. I can't remember what quality I'm streaming at, but my screen's 1440p, so it's this little bit here. It says graphics, and it says 149 FPS. That's not necessarily how many frames per second it's actually showing, but that's how many. That's like the maximum it can render at on your current setup. So sometimes that can be like 1000 FPS. Obviously, it's not gonna render at 1000 FPS, but on your screen. But
is there any risk that your game is efficiently runs at 1000 FPS, but now everything is 16 times as fast?
Depends how you've coded things. So if we get onto coding, onto programming, then we'll talk about frame rate dependence and independence. But there's ways of making things frame rate independent. So there can be a risk if you write things badly. There's not the risk of physics going wrong, generally speaking, because physics happens at a fixed time step. So it always renders at, by default, 50 times a second. You get the opposite problem. If you're on a slow setup, the physics can slow down such that it's slower than 50 frames per second. But I say frames, it's more like 50 hertz. I shouldn't mix up my terminology there, but yeah.
So if your window gets cluttered, you can close windows by, I think you can right click and close.
Yeah, so if I didn't want the game tab open, I can go close tab here.
Or you can just press middle mouse button, I think, close it.
Yep. And if I want back open, I can go to window here and I can find it again. There it is, so yeah, general game. And oh, Jesus. It gives me a huge game window.
So if you close game again.
Yep.
So this is only for game. If game is closed and you click play,
it'll bring it back up.
It'll bring up game.
You'll just slot it there, in the right place.
And also another nice feature of the game window is you can click maximize on play in the top right.
So here there's this button, maximize on play. If I click that and then I play, it'll fill the whole editor with just the game window. And bring out a notice about tutorials. Snipe this guy. Cool.
So on the left hand side, it's usually on the left, there's the hierarchy.
Yep.
And it will display everything currently in the scene. So these are game objects. So if you click on a random game object.
So if I click on the player here. The player is in fact
It'll
over here.
highlight it. But obviously, it might be somewhere random. So if you double click on player, it will focus on.
Yep. Yeah. You can also do that if you like hover somewhere else. If you press F, then it frame selects. There we are.
Oh, you're moving around by using what keys?
Yeah, so currently, if you want to navigate around the scene view, if you hold in right click, it rotates the view. And I'm navigating by using WASD and E and Q. So E and Q goes up and down, WASD goes, forward, backward, left, right. It's kind of like a flight control, sort of. This is not the only way of navigating, but it's my preferred way. You can use the middle mouse button to kind of pan the view around. So this only moves the camera up, down, left, right as you're holding middle mouse. But I prefer just holding in right click and flying around.
So if we're talking about views and moving around, on the top right there's a little axis graph.
This
Click
one.
one of the axis, it will focus.
Yeah, so if I click this Z-axis, then it's aligned my view of the Z-axis. So obviously if we're working in 3D, we have the X, Y, and Z axes. So some other game engines and some like modeling programs have Z as up, but Unity has Y as up. That can be really annoying if you're exporting from something like Blender, which does it, I think, the other way round. So you have to like rotate all your models 90 degrees, but that's kind of just the realities of working with different pieces of software. So you can
under this axis graph here, there's it says perspective right now.
Yeah.
If you click that, it will put it into isometric mode, so everything's 2D.
So it's isometric now, and it's kind of a lot weirder to navigate around.
This is good because you can put it in this mode and then click one of the axes and then line up blocks nicely.
Yeah. So now it'll be real easy to just line up floors and walls and stuff. I'm using the scroll wheel to zoom in and out as well. So these kind of controls are just something that you kind of get more used to as you use Unity a lot more. So, don't worry if at the start it takes you like a little while to position things properly and move the camera around. You kind of get used to it. It's like any piece of software, really. Sort of like just keyboard shortcuts are the kind of things that you kind of fumble around a bit with to start off, but then you get used to it. So I go back into perspective.
So speaking of moving around objects, there's two basic ways. If you look at the object here, there's arrows for the center. You can use these to move the object around.
Yeah.
Do you want to just move it around?
Yeah. Can you see my cursor, by the way? My mouse cursor?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So if I wanted to move this along the Z, I hold the blue little arrow here, and that moves my player around. And then if I wanted to go X, then similar. And if I wanted to go along the Y, then same. And then I can undo using Control Z like every other piece of software.
There's also,
or redo using Control Y.
if you click the center of the arrows, it's not locked to an axis, but that gets really funky.
The center of the arrow, like...
So like, so like center of all three. Yeah, so one of those squares.
Oh yeah, so if you click one of these squares, then it's locked to a pair of axes. So if I wanted to move this object around the XZ plane, so along the floor, I hold this little square here, and then I can't move it up on the Y. So if I try, then it just aligns to the floor. And similar if I wanted to do it along the other two pairs of axes. Which is real nice if you're trying to align something on the floor. You just hold this it's the little green square gizmo here. You can just kind of fly around the floor like this. Super useful. Everyone following so far? Go on, sorry?
I was just saying this only does positions, but you might also want to do rotation as well.
Yep.
So to change it to rotation mode in the top left, there's a toolbar.
There's all these tools. So the ones that you'll need most often. So there is the hand tool. So this gets rid of the selection, the what do you call the translation gizmo. This just goes back to like navigation around the scene. What I had selected just then was the move tool. So this adds this little movement gizmo with these 3 axes and the 3 little squares. There's also rotation. So this adds this, I think it's a gimbal, I call it. So if I want to rotate around certain axes, it's brought up the 3 same axes as before. So if I want to rotate around the y-axis, so around the pointing up, I hold the little green tool and I can move it around. If I want to move in segments of, I think it's 15 degrees by default, I can hold in control and it will snap to a certain certain degree values. So I think it's 15 by default. Yeah, that checks out. I can do maths. You might want to play around with this by yourself because it's kind of, as you drag it to the right, it rotates anti-clockwise and left clockwise. Should probably actually mention as well, on the move tool you can also use control and it snaps to a grid. So same thing. And then same with these other axes. If I want to rotate it around the Z, I can use this little gizmo, and around the X, this little one. And then I'll just put it back how it was.
And if you don't click an axis there, it just rotates it freely.
So you see this circle that's around all 3 of those gizmos? I can hold this and it's, if I kind of, it rotates it, I think it's relative to how the screen is pointing. If you do this like outer one, and if you, yeah, as Joshua says, if you click none of these 4 kind of controls, you kind of rotate freely around the sphere, which is kind of funky to use, but it can be useful.
I don't know why you would use that.
Yeah, I always feel you get more control using the along individual axes. If I'm doing it like freehand like this, you'd never get it right. Just wee. So that's movement and rotation. We've also got scaling. So if you wanted to make something bigger, and actually now I'm thinking the player's probably the best one to show because it's actually visible. So if I were to pick, let's say the enemy turn it. No, the hoverbot. So if I pick this one, I hope this works. So it's the same thing as before. We got the 3 individual axes, so you can make it look really silly by stretching it out on one of the axes like this, or along the X like this, or along the Y like that's working really strangely. But if you want to scale something along all 3 axes, there's this little cube in the middle. You hold that in, and it scales it along all the axes. So now it's getting huge. You can just undo that.
So those are the main 3 tools we're going to use. The other 3, to be honest, I don't really know what they do.
These ones, yeah. So these ones are. These are more like tuned for. Well, these 2 are more tuned for 2D. So Unity is annoying in that its 2D mode just exists in the same world as its 3D mode. It's kind of maybe beyond the scope of a beginner, but you can press this 2D button here in the scene view and it will flatten the entire world out. There's kind of a different set of components that you'd use for 2D as opposed to 3D. So whereas for 3D you'd add things like meshes, models, that kind of stuff. I'll get onto the Shuriken icons in a second. Yeah, whereas with 3D, you work with models and meshes and that kind of stuff. In 2D, you'd use sprites. So if you want to make a 2D game, you can, using these same similar controls. Where this little rect tool here will give you control over sprites in a 2D plane. But not only sprites either, it's the user interface system as well. What was that, sorry?
Yeah, so I think that works on GUI stuff too.
Yeah, so that's the UI system. I think this game does have one. I was just trying to work out which one of these.
If you scroll out.
Yeah, if I scroll out forever, I can see it here because they've stuck it on Game Manager. Oh boy. So I think user interfaces are something that we'll probably get onto later rather than right now, but just to give you a very surface level look at these, if I were to select, for example, something that I can visibly see right here, is it this? Let's go, yeah, so I've got the rect tool selected here, and it's selected this UI element. So I can make this like bigger and look really bad. And then when I play the game, this should appear really malformed. Or not at all, that's also fine. Let me undo that. Let me do it. Yeah, I think that's If I do it on this, for God's sake. Let's do it on the player health instead. It will look really silly, but you'll be able to see it in game. Yeah, so it's obviously looks really bad because it's not meant to look like that, but yeah. So that's the UI system and the 2D tools.
Wait, did someone say something?
Yeah, so you're asking about the shuriken icons. So you mean these ones. These are particle systems. So if I go on the hoverbot, I don't know which ones these would be, but presumably one of these objects here is a particle system. It's probably the... not those. There we go. Yeah, okay.
Those are gizmos. Those are only visible in the editor mode.
Yeah.
And if you look on the top right, there's a gizmos option.
Yep. So this little drop down here.
Change the size and stuff.
Yeah. So these little shuriken ones in particular are particle systems, and they're I suppose they do what they say in the tin. So that's for stuff like if you wanted to have flames, then you'd have a particle system. So they spawn in individual little particles, and there's a whole host of things you could do with particles. But if the gizmo is annoying, you can turn it off in this menu. If I find where it is. Particle system. Yeah. So there's a show hide icon here. I can turn those off. And that goes for any of the things. So if I wanted to turn off the audio source, that's also on here. I wanted to turn off the cameras, then I can. So the camera on the player. So the player had a camera gizmo on it before, now it doesn't. But I can put that back if it's... Oh, it should have done. No, I mean, it's showing the whole camera, isn't it? There it is. Yeah. Let me turn that back on so I can see what I'm doing. Yeah. So that's what the little shuriken icon is. They're just to help you like see things in the scene from far away.
Something nice about Unity is if you turn off maximize play.
Maximize on play. Yep. Turn it off.
And then if you play the game, yeah, turn it off.
Turn it off.
And then play the game.
Yep.
But what you can do.
I'm rotated. Hang on a minute. I didn't reset the player properly. Okay, so not only can you modify rotation and stuff using these tools, you can also do it manually using these values on this component called transform here. So I can just put in zeros here. We'll go into more detail about that later, I think. Yeah, so, sorry, there we are.
So when this is playing in editor mode, you can actually edit whatever you want, and it will automatically update in the game. So you can change, if you change the size of the health bar.
So yeah, I can... Oh, where was it? It was in Game Manager, Player Health. So I can go to the scene view. It's still playing the game in the background, but I can go here, and this looks really awkward. But yeah, I can do that, and then in the game it's automatically changed that. But if I come out of play mode, it's reset it to back what it was before. So changing values on objects as the game's running is like a non-destructive way of quickly seeing what a change does. What you do need to be wary of is if you're in game mode and you change a bunch of things, it will undo your changes. So be wary that you make sure you're out of play mode if you actually want to make changes that persist. It's kind of a trap a lot of people fall into, where they make a load of changes and they're like, oh no, I'm in play mode. And they disappear.
So does everyone have Unity installed now? So we can start doing this.
Yeah, if we have Unity installed, then we can go on to this little tutorials window it has at the side here.
Yeah, I'm all set up.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
everyone has the this project open right now from the Unity Hub.
Yeah, so I can show you what that is.
And it's the FPS micro game.
So yeah, if you install Unity through the hub, then there's this learn section here. So you should have your installs. You should have 2019.4 point. It actually doesn't matter which version of 2019.4, I don't think. This works on 2019.4.0, which I had already. I have a lot of other versions of Unity here. Yeah, it's the Learn tab. It's this FPS micro game. It's the first one. But you know, after this session, there's loads more here. So there's like a wealth of stuff just kind of easily accessible. Yeah, there's loads of them. So just install this one. Here we are.
So if we say that everyone's got it now, we start the going through the tutorial together.
Speak now or forever hold your peace. Right, no one's objecting. I think they must all have it. Right, so this is the part where you can play along. We're just going to be going through, well, all being well, if you open up this project, you should see this little tutorials window on the right-hand side. So, you know, here I can just click these. Is that something to say? Cool. Ooh. Yeah, so I click this and it starts to give you a kind of overview of parts of the Unity editor. So, you know, in this tutorial, you'll start by playing the FPS game. After that, you'll learn how to make your first modification in Unity. And we'll click start, so it starts in the corner here. If we're going too fast or too slow, then just let us know in... yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm hoping the recording works. If the recording doesn't work, then I'll just do a separate recording later and try and include most of the details that we had here. Let me just... It's still recording, so we're good. Alright, so we're going to kick off with this built-in tutorial. So the first thing it's asking us to do is enter play mode. So as we said before, this is scene view. If we click the play mode, it should open up the game window and start playing the game. So this is useful if you've just made some changes and you just want to see how the game plays really quickly. As it's saying here, if we press ESC, then it defocuses the mouse from inside the game to give us our cursor back. If we click back in the scene, then it will shoot your gun and give you back control over the character. Then you press ESC again, and we can click the play button again, exits play mode. So the second thing it's asking us to do is to make a modification. So over here, as we mentioned, this is the hierarchy view. It's got every single game object in our scene. So if we click the player, it's going to ask us to change a property. So just a brief overview, in Unity, a game object is kind of an empty wrapper for anything that can be in your scene. So that can be a player, an enemy, a ball, a pickup, you know, kind of almost basic building block of a game. And game objects have components on them. So the component that's on every game object is its transform, and that's the one that holds its position, its rotation, and its scale. So those are the things we were moving around before with the little gizmos. And it also has a list of components. So components are kind of I call them kind of packages of behavior almost. This project has a bunch already on this player, so these are the kind of variables that are exposed to us that we can change. So this is I think this is the player controller, and this is the gravity downforce variable. So I don't know what it's asking us to change it to. I think it's asking us to change it to whatever we want. So if I double it to 40, press enter, we can press next, and then we go to play mode. I realize I didn't actually jump before, so I don't know how high the jump was, but if I press space, I think it must be. So I'm not jumping very high, and that's presumably because I put the gravity downforce to a lot more than it was. So if I...
Can you change the gravity?
yeah, if I clear it... I don't think it's letting me because it's the... If I go back... So you can go back automatically here. Yeah, I think because I've already done that, then it's not going to let me change it back. Okay. Yeah, exit play mode. If I just go done. Alright, no, it's come back. So if I change that to 20, presumably I was jumping a lot higher before. So I did a little bunny hop when I changed that to 40. Yeah, there we go. A lot higher. Yeah. So that was the first part. That was playtest. And the second part of this tutorial is to add a room. Let's go save. Was that all good so far? Any questions in particular with modifying values and navigating the play and play mode and edit mode? Nope, cool.
Okay.
What was that, sorry?
I said makes sense, but I think I cut out.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Right. If that makes sense, then we'll continue. So the second part is going to go on about how to add things to the scene view. So obviously when you're building a game, you'll have things kind of in your project view, which is this little bit at the bottom here. So the project view contains things that you can add to your game. So it's kind of like a warehouse. If the scene view is my game, like, that I'm building, my project view is my warehouse of things that I could add to my game. So this part of the tutorial is going to tell us how to add things. So this is just going to go over what each part of the editor is. So as we mentioned, the hierarchy is everything currently in our scene in a list that has like every individual object, and we can expand these little... Well, it's not going to let me now because it's the tutorial thing, but... and then, yeah, the scene view, which visually shows where everything is and how it's how everything's connected. I'm just going to go over this little toolbar. So the hand tool, as we mentioned, is to navigate around the scene. So if we, if you right click, then it starts to rotate the view, and you can use WASD to move around. If I use middle mouse button, I can pan the screen around relative to where the camera's facing. So in here, it's asking us to pan around the scene. You can also use the left mouse button to pan in hand tool mode. And now it's asking us to orbit. So it's asking us, if you hold in Alt and the left mouse button, you can orbit. That's one I don't actually use very often. So this is orbiting around kind of the center of the view. So Alt, left click, and it orbits around. Zooming in, that's just the scroll wheel. Pretty straightforward. Right, now we're moving on to actually adding things. So, like I said, the project view is kind of like a warehouse. The objects in the warehouse are prefabs. So a prefab is an object that we can add to our scene. So a prefab can be anything. It can be a room, a player, an enemy. It can be a UI element. It can be literally anything in Unity. So this project has a load of prefabs for individual rooms that we can add to this kind of building. If we go next, it's going to ask us to drag one of them in. So you just okay, it's gonna, if you click the name and drag it in, and you can kind of place it wherever you want. By default, it's going to try and snap it to the surface that you're pointing on. So, you know, if I positioned it really awkwardly, I can like position it on the corner of one of these rooms, so that makes no sense. If we just plonk it kind of in the middle here, that's a really awkward place, because our player starts down here, we've got this room, and we've got this doorway, but then we've got this room on this big flat surface, which kind of doesn't make any sense. So it's going to ask us to move it. So we use the move tool, and then we can reposition this exactly where we want it. So I think we should reposition it so it faces up with this this doorway that's already here. So to make this a little bit easier, I can press F, and that will move me closer to it. Sometimes the movement tools can be quite slow, so I can move this freely by just dragging it. But I can also hold in its control, and it will snap it to the grid. So if I want to line this up exactly with the door, I'll use control, because if I don't use control, then I'll probably miss it by like a couple pixels. I can drag this over, and it should be kind of lined up. Really badly, but yeah. Ooh. Right. So this project has a Nav Mesh on it. Nav Meshes and like the intricacies of how they work is maybe a little bit advanced, but a Nav Mesh is basically an auto-generated pathing system that supposedly it's this enemy down here that's using to be able to walk around the room. So when you make changes like this in this project, so this Nav Mesh you can see here is these.
Talk about this later.
Yeah, Nav Meshes are a little bit advanced, but just a kind of a brief overview. There's Nav Meshes, these little blue areas here. This defines where things can walk. So if we bake this, then it should automatically update. Not automatically, sorry, manually. It should manually update so that it fills in stuff like these stairs and this new room. It should have baked. Here we go next. Cool. So we've added a room, we've done the Nav Mesh update, which is maybe something that you won't use that often, but we're done with that part of the tutorial. Any questions so far? Or does that all make sense?
So actually, I see you've kind of made your room centered and very cleanly in line with that door. How do you do that?
So how have I made this room kind of line up very cleanly? So how so? Like, I've used control, I'm holding in control while I'm dragging to snap it kind of to a grid to line it up with the wall here. If you mean kind of horizontally, I just did that by eye.
I just want to say that it doesn't actually snap to a grid. It moves it by one unit.
Yeah. That's more accurate to say that, isn't it, actually?
If you look on top right, its Z position is 11.97 right now, which slightly pushes it outside the wall.
Yeah, okay. You can also, if it's like slightly off, you can manually tweak things there. So I say 12. Okay, yeah, now it's perfectly aligned. Sorry about that, yeah. I suppose it's also Z fighting there, so, you know, we can move it a little bit out if you want. Like that probably works better. I also think this room is a little bit taller than the other one, so the wall is awkwardly tall, but that's fine. Does that make sense? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So you got out a little bit there. Was that
Do you want to read? do the nav mesh again.
Oh yeah, of course. Nav Mesh was there. I'll just bake that again. And let's move the things up the stairs a little bit. Cool. Right, if that all makes sense, we'll move on to the next part, which is editing colours, apparently. Let's make the level more colourful by changing the floor material. Okay, so in the project window again, we've got this array of materials. So a material is kind of, it can be a collection of textures and colours that are applied to things in the scene. If you see me harping on about shaders at any point, materials kind of are a container for a shader that you can then, you can make different versions of a material and then apply them to objects in the scene. So I think it's telling us that the floor grey material is the one that is already applied to most of the things in this scene because, you know, everything is horrible grey colour. And if I select that, yeah, so if I select this, it gives us all these options to change.
This is the inspector window, by the way.
Yeah.
If anyone has inspector window, it would be this on the right hand side. It's usually.
Yeah, so the inspector window basically gives you any like properties of the thing you currently have selected. So beforehand, when I had the player or the enemy selected, when it was displaying its transform component and like the... Remember when we did the gravity change? That was on the inspector window. So right here we have the standard shader. So this is kind of the default material. So the kind of intricacies of how this works aren't really important. This is just this is a material that's designed to give you kind of a lot of flexibility over how things look. So we can modify loads of properties about this, some of which are not yet relevant. A lot of this is kind of way beyond kind of a beginner thing. But the thing it's asking us to change is the albedo. So the albedo is kind of what you would think of as the base color of an object. So if we change this to purple, yeah, so it's changed the kind of color of half of these tiles. So I suppose this floor grey material is applied to kind of every other tile on this floor. Maybe make this a little less saturated. Something like that might work. So yeah, that's changing colours. That's that part of the tutorial done. I mean, if we were to play this now, then maybe this purple's a little bit obnoxious. Yeah, so
let me just say, as before, you could edit stuff. So if you find the material,
that's fine. What it was. Probably an art materials level. Yeah, so it was here.
So if you play again.
Yeah, if I go and play. I think it's on... Yeah. So I actually do this in real time. I'm going to change this in real time.
However, because this is in your prefab projects box,
yep,
this one stays during when you stop playing.
Yeah. So... Yeah, that's a kind of a distinction here. So when I said kind of changes you make are not, they don't persist, that's things in the hierarchy. But if you're editing stuff in the project view, so, you know, prefabs, materials, that kind of thing, these stay the same. So if I go out of play mode here, it's still red. Again, this is the kind of thing you sort of get used to when you're working with Unity. I'm going to change this to something a little less saturated, so it's a bit nicer to look at. Right, everything with changing colours okay so far?
It's kind of relevant that I've encountered an unexpected problem I totally should have been expecting.
Okay, what is your problem?
So it's kind of colours plus the last tutorial a little bit. So in that room we added, I made the room perfectly line up with the other wall.
Yep.
Now they're kind of fighting for white position.
Yeah, so I see what you mean. So if you had it like lined up exactly like that, I mean, you can. I don't know how well it comes off on stream, but even if they're the similar color, you can see it there. So if you change the wall, this wall, is that the problem you're having?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is kind of awkward because the kind of easiest way to get rid of this is to just move the wall. There are kind of more advanced things you can do with shaders to kind of fix this problem, but that kind of occurs when this face on this part of the wall and this forward-facing face on this part of the wall are exactly aligned. When it's rendering the scene, it doesn't know which pixel is, well, like, it doesn't know which pixel of each face is meant to be in front of the other one. And because of, like, I think it's because of kind of floating point inaccuracies. Doesn't, like, but per frame, it thinks, like, one pixel's in front of the other. And then the next frame, if you've moved it, it thinks the other pixel's in front of it. So you get this kind of awkward... It's called Z fighting because it's, relative to the camera, it's the Z distance, I suppose, is the same. So the easiest way to change that is to just move it out of the way. But yeah, that's... Yeah, sorry? Go on.
Give one of them priority or something.
Yeah, so I think that is possible, but I'm not entirely sure if the standard shader gives you that option.
Okay. Well, never mind. At least it's possible.
Yeah, so there's another possibility.
Layers, right?
Oh, sorry?
Is it layers or is that only physics? I don't know. I mean,
yeah, layers is primarily physics. I know the sprites layers are used to fix this problem, but that's in 2D. In 3D, it's a little bit more awkward because if you apply something on a layer, it would be to the whole object, and then you get problems where, you know, if you said this wall is in front of, like, if you said this, oh, that's weird. If you said like this section of wall is in front of this section of wall, then it would always be in front. So you'd like go over here and it would render like this section of wall in front of it. I've had that problem before with things. Another option here is, you know, if you wanted to delete just this section of wall, they are individual objects. So this wall object we added here actually has this door as a separate object. We can just delete that. I think you have to make it not a prefab to do that. Maybe that's a little bit more advanced, but yeah.
if you click the uppermost game object.
So, just this one? Yeah, you can... Should be able to unpack. Oh, it's the room alter, isn't it? Yeah, sorry. So, if you've added a prefab to a scene and you want to kind of make changes to it, if you go unpack prefab, then I should be able to go to this individual wall and get rid of it. Yeah, there we go. So...
This feature's only in the newest version, by the way. I think 2018 didn't have this.
Yeah, they redid the prefab system at some point, so that's another way to do it. So the way I did that is when I selected it, I just pressed delete. No, it'll just remove the object, and you can undo, redo with Control Z, Control Y. I mean, I'll leave it like that. I'll leave the wall non-existent and line it up. It's really awkward how this room is like higher up than the other one. I'm going to put that down a bit as well so these checkerboards line up. It's strange how the prefab is kind of higher up. Right, shall we move on to the next stage of this tutorial? Save. One thing you will kind of get used to with Unity as well is compulsively hitting Control S, because I've lost so much progress before when, you know, if Unity crashes or something goes wrong, you want to make sure you save very often, so I just hit Control S kind of all the time. It's a compulsion. Right, I'm gonna move on to this add enemy bot section now. Hang on a sec. Right, so we are going to add another prefab, and the prefab this time is going to be another enemy bot. So when I was in the play mode, I was shooting this little enemy here. We're gonna add another to make it a bit more tricky. So it's just reminding us that the project window contains prefabs. So if we just go start, as before, so like with the section of level here, we can add this prefab by just dragging it into the scene. So I can plonk it wherever I want. I'll probably plonk it here. And as before, if it's not in the right place exactly, you can move it around freely if you want. So if I decided I want it, no, over here actually, I can do that. Let's go next. So that's that whole tutorial already. So blah 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 blah. Yeah, so the next part of this tutorial is going to be about building the game. So if I just go done here, we can see the change that we've made if I go into play mode. So now I start in this small room, I go in here, and there's 2 enemies now. So it's made the game a little bit harder. A lot louder as well. Like I've had to increase my volume because Discord's a little bit quiet, but are we comfortable with adding prefabs? What was that, sorry?
Should we just go over a few more things?
Yeah, sure. Before we go on to building and sharing. Yeah, okay.
So, if you want to make a new material or a new anything in the project menu, if you just right click.
Yeah, so on this this project view right here, right click, there's this create at the top here. So there's a lot of options here, but if we go to material, we can call this whatever we want. So you might want to figure out a naming convention. We'll just go with the same convention I've got here and call this. Let's make a new floor. So floor. What color do we want this? Let's go purple. Call it floor purple. So that's given us default material. We can change it to a nice purple, maybe like that kind of color. Actually, we can go over some of the other properties on the standard shader. So Albedo, as we mentioned, is kind of like the base color. So you know, if I look at my if I look down at my desk, it's black. That's the Albedo color. But that's not the only property of material, right? Because it's, you know, it's made of fake wood, so it's not very reflective. And that's this kind of metallic property here. So there are in fact kind of, I can up the metallicness of this. It shows a.
I just want to say that.
Yeah, go on.
It doesn't make perfect reflections.
Yeah, so
it looks very funky, the reflections.
Yeah. So it won't like reflect parts of your scene, but it will look shiny. Sort of.
It just reflects the light.
Yeah. Yeah, it reflects only the light, not kind of. There's no indirect lighting by default. So that's a kind of very advanced lighting topic. That's stuff like global illumination and ray tracing. You know, the internet's favorite buzzword for rendering currently. So if we're editing a material, you kind of get this preview here. It's kind of nice. Go on, sorry.
I was just gonna say, to apply the material.
Yep.
You just hold it down from the project menu.
So if I hold left click,
drag it onto whatever.
Yeah, so I'm holding left click here, and I should be able to. Oh, that's being really awkward, actually, isn't it? I don't know why that's coming up as black. That's really strange.
It's because the metallic. If you turn the metallic down.
I turned the metallic down at probably. Yeah. I think that's to do with the lighting setup of this project by default. Yeah, we'll leave metallic at 0 for now, just because it's dying if I don't. So the other property we have here is smoothness. So if I go back to my table example, it doesn't reflect that much light, but it reflects a little bit. So the smoothness here basically defines how it reflects light. If we put smoothness to 0, then that's a very rough surface. So that would be something like wood or cloth maybe. But if we were to go smoothness up, that might be a very shiny, like a polished surface. So you get this very, this tiny little dot of reflection here, rather than a completely no specular. It's called specular lighting, but not too important terminology. So kind of play around with the smoothness to get a lighting that you want. So whereas most of these tiles on the floor are very very basic looking lighting, these two tiles here look like the floor's been polished. But I'll keep it. I'll keep it like that actually. They'll look unique. There's a lot of other properties you can add to materials, but kind of normal, height, occlusion, and detail mask are maybe a little bit advanced. But there's also emission, so I think you have to have your scene set up properly for this to work, but you can also make them emit light. If you're using global illumination or ray tracing, so maybe a little bit more advanced, this will mean that these objects will glow, but you kind of have to have the scene set up for that already. And I don't think this is, so I'm going to turn emission off.
So if we go back to the prefabs folder in the project window.
The prefabs folder, so is that the one with like the enemies and stuff in? Yeah.
Yeah, so we add another enemy, but instead of dragging it onto the scene, you can drag it directly into the hierarchy.
Yeah, so if I find where the enemies are, I can add it here, and it will add it kind of to a default position, which is in fact the center of the scene. So this is at 0, 0, 0. It's the center of this room. And as before, I can place it where I want. Yeah, so the objects in the scene view and the objects in the hierarchy view are the same ones. It's kind of useful to think of them as the same thing. In fact, if I want to, the hoverbot that I added before, yes, added it here under this general tab here. I can move that with the other enemies. So now they're all together.
So in the hierarchy, you can do multi-select by clicking one, and then control, and then click on any more you want.
Yeah.
It will select individual ones, but if you have a group like our enemies here, you can select the first one in the hierarchy, and then if you hold shift and then select the last one, it will select all of them. Objects between them.
There is in fact also a turret down there it's selected. And if I wanted to only deal with these 3 hoverbots and not the turret, I can just press control, click that, and it'll unselect it. So yeah, so if I want to move all these together, just select them all and you can do. Yeah.
So if you don't want to select each of them all the time, you can group your game objects. So if you select all the enemies.
So is that maybe all the enemies including the turret?
Yeah, and if you drag them down, if you hold left click on them and then move them into, then hover over enemies above it, and then let go.
Yep.
It will then group the game objects under the enemies game object.
So just to kind of go over this, what they've done here is kind of, if you just have all your objects in the scene or in the hierarchy, it can kind of get a little bit messy because you have just things everywhere. What they've done here is they've added empty game objects and just named them something different and then listed things underneath it. This is just their way of keeping the scene clean. Although I noticed kind of annoyingly, so whereas player in general here are centered on the world, they're at 0, 0, 0, the enemies, they've got it in a weird place. So I'm actually going to undo that. Oh, come on. Oh, I'm just going to go to the transform here for this enemy's game object, and I'm going to go to reset, and that's going to put it at 0, 0, 0. You can also, so if I undo that, you can type in 000 manually. So the way I did that is I click on it, I press 0. If I press tab, then it goes to the next one. And then I'm going to put them back under enemies. Oop, I missed. And you can collapse this.
So the enemy's header there, that's called the parents, and the ones underneath it are children.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is useful if you just want to move things as a group. It's called hierarchy because it is literally like a hierarchy. So you've got these parents and you've got its children. So anything under a parent. So when I move the parent, it will move all its children relative. It also works with rotation. So if I rotate this, it's probably going to look really, really strange. But I think scale also will kind of do strange things, but yeah. So just know that if you apply transformations to the parent, if, for example, I do rotations, it's going to rotate everything relative to the center rather than...
If you do rotate it...
Yeah.
Wait, yeah, so if you rotate it a little bit...
Well, I'll
click on a child.
I'll click on turret. Or one of the hoverbots. I'll click on hoverbot. Yeah.
But the hoverbots, like the rotation's still 0, 0, 0. Because that the value listed there is actually relative to the parent.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than being the actual rotation it is.
Yeah.
It's relative.
Yeah, this is one of these kind of things you have to get used to a little bit. So
it's all active. So I will add my position to my parents, and my children will add their position to my position.
Yeah.
And my parents as well. It's all additive together.
So if I put the rotation here back to 0, 0, 0, if I put the kind of position of the enemy's parent at, I don't know, 5, 0, 0. So on its X, it's 5. On the Y and Z, it's 0. Now, if I go to the enemy hoverboard, this one, it's got its position here as 6, but that's relative to the parent. So it's 6 away from the parent position, but its kind of global position, its world position, would actually be 11, 0.5, 0.25. So this little point here in world space is 11.5, 0.25. I mean, if I were to drag this enemy hoverbot off enemies and put it in its kind of put it at the top of the hierarchy, not underneath anything, then yeah, 11. It's apply that for us. Yeah. Everyone following so far? Alright, no one's saying no, so I think we're golden.
Do you want to move on to build and share?
Yeah, okay. So once you've kind of finished placing things in your scene, in your game, I'm actually going to move this back because one of those is now off the screen, or out of the room. Yeah, once you've finished placing everything, making all your changes, and you're happy with your game, you know, you've played it in play mode, and you're happy with the difficulty and, you know, how fun everything is. You know, people can't play this yet. It's not like a download that they can just find and play. So you need to build your game first. So if we go to build and share, this is going to tell us how to build our game. So when we build it, we put it in a format other people can play. Congratulations, you're about to build your project into an actual game that your friends and family can play on your very own dedicated web page. Okay, so... Oh, that's actually going to go in. Okay, so I was going to ask us to take a cover photo. This is something I've never done inside Unity before, actually. Wait, so enter play mode. We're going to find somewhere that looks awesome and amazing. I'm going to just use this room. Press tab to pause the game. Oh, so this is something they built into the game by itself. This isn't generally Unity stuff, so they've actually added this. Take new. That's very nice. Cool, it'll be saved in the assets root folder. Yeah, so this is something they've built in themselves rather than something that's generally in Unity. Go to File, and it's going to ask us to open the Build Settings menu. Right, okay, so it's going to ask us to build a web game. So, Unity web games are Webgl. So, if you're kind of vaguely experienced with graphics programming, then you'll be aware of OpenGL. WebGL is just the web-specific kind of version of that. Slightly different, but that's the basics. Yeah, it's going to ask us to kind of change platform to WebGL. Which is not going to let me do because I don't have WebGL model installed. So, well, that's kind of annoying. What I'm going to have to do here is go into the Unity hub, go to installs, and if you go to, I actually need to figure out how to do this properly. So yeah, if you go to the 2019.4.12 install, go to add modules, we're going to have to find WebGL here. So go to WebGL, build support, go done, and it should download that for us. I didn't realize it was going to ask us to build to WebGL, so I'm just going to have to wait a while for this to install. So if you have any other questions in the meantime while this is installing, this is your time to jump in.
The tutorial project I have here has an extra step regarding importing your own assets.
Okay, so you mean over here? It has, if I go back.
Over there.
So what, yours has add enemy bot and then importing something. Oh, you cut out a little bit there. I couldn't hear everything you were saying.
I didn't hear her saying anything, but the microphone is back. Yeah, it's good.
Okay. So you have another thing here. That's weird. Do all of you have another thing there?
Yeah, I have it as well.
Oh, maybe it's because I downloaded this before I downloaded 2019.4.12. Maybe they've updated the tutorial in between the time when I downloaded it, and that was like 2 days ago. That's weird.
Interesting.
I mean,
Yeah,
what?
I was trying to... I realised I was muted.
Oh, were you trying to say?
It's because we have the late. Oh, I have a later version of Unity Hub. Maybe that's why.
Yeah, maybe. That's really weird. I don't have that, so I don't know if people want to try that part of the tutorial out while it's installing WebGL for me. And then let us know if you have any weird problems, but yeah, I don't know why it's not giving me that. That's weird. I suppose for the sake of the recording, I can talk about some other kind of tricks you can use in Unity. So, I'm going to go off script here. When we were talking about positioning things here, there's more controls you have. So if I were to select the whole room, if I want to position this and snap one of the corners to another corner in the scene already, I can actually hold in V, and when I hover over a vertex, it will snap the cursor to it. If I now hold in left click and start to move it, it's going to snap that corner to another corner. So I wanted it to snap it right. It's going to be really annoying to actually align this, isn't it? But I want to snap it exactly to this corner. I can select this one and snap it right there. That's one of my favourite placement tools. But of course now the door's moved, so I'll just put it back. How are we doing on our WebGL download? Still got a bit longer. What other Unity things can I throw in here? I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Joshua.
I mean, I was trying to add some stuff when I was muted, but if you go back to the build option.
Yep, this is the build settings menu again.
They've already pre-done it, but if you look at
you're kind
scenes in build at the top, so
yeah.
when you build the whole project, you won't have anything in it. So there's a button on the right that says Add Open Scenes. So then they've already done it, but if you click that, it will just add your current scene to the listing. And
in fact, I can.
I think you can drag them around, right?
Yeah, let me just. We're in the main scene actually. So if I like click main scene and delete, that would mean that this scene I'm currently in won't get added when I build the game. So I'd have to go add open scenes and it will add it. Once they're all added, you can like disable some of them. So if I wanted to only have the main scene in my build, I can just have this one ticked. But I think it will only work if I have them all ticked.
So then if you look on the right hand side, there's a number next to it.
Yeah.
The entry scene will be
this one.
The 0.
Yeah. So if I change this around, if I wanted my win scene to be the first one that loads when I load the game, that'd be really weird, but I can do that just by making sure that's the top one. Generally speaking, the only ordering that will be relevant here will be which one's first. There's probably some intricacies with the scene ordering of these other three. I think when you're scripting, you can select which scene to load by its index number here. But generally speaking, the most relevant thing will just be which one's first. That's the one that gets loaded first. So when we build this game, the first thing we'll see is the intro menu, which makes sense.
So if we're talking about building, if you go to File,
just make sure. Okay, we're almost done here. Right, File.
I think File. Oh no, sorry, Edit.
Edit. Yeah.
Edit. And then Project Settings near the bottom.
Project Settings. So I'll make this a little bit bigger so you can see.
Exactly where it is.
You're probably gonna go to player, right? Yeah.
And then there's an option default icon.
Yeah.
And then there's nothing on there. But you can, if you put something there.
Yeah, if I were to put, it's brought up all of the kind of little texture icons that are in this game. So I could select this random weapon here. When I build the game, that's going to be the icon in the tray here. In the taskbar. Toolbar? No. You know what I mean. Like the little Unity icon here. It's going to be a little weapon. That's not the only thing you can change, of course. So if I wanted to change... It's got the...
It's currently Unity Project.
Yeah, so it's called Unity Project, but if I wanted to call it like... let's be real cringe and call it like Super Amazing Shooty Boy. Now the game is going to be called that when I build it. It's got the version number, so if you've already published this game and you're doing an update, then you'll change this to like something like 1.1.2 preview 0.2 or something, but I'll leave that how it is. And you also might want to change your default your company name to something that's not default company, so I'm going to call it Dan. That's my company. There's a lot of other settings you can change here. So a lot of these are a little bit out of the scope, but you can override, for some reason, you can override the icon for different resolutions. That might be if you've got, if you've rendered this icon to separate resolutions and you wanted it to not scale it automatically, then you can assign those there. Resolution presentation gives you kind of the default, I suppose the default resolution of the game when it opens. So by like here it's a window That's 960 by 540. But we could make this, you know, if we wanted it to be maximized by default, or if we wanted it to just be full screen, we can do that. I'll leave it as windowed for now.
Should we build to a Windows rather than build to WebGL?
Yeah, I've got the Windows build tools on here, so I can actually show you building rather than just WebGL. So if I go back to the build settings, if I made sure I've got PC, Mac, and Linux standalone selected, so the one that you're currently building to has this little Unity icon next to it. So I'm building to PC. If I select, Windows 8664, so that's 64-bit. You can build to 32-bit if you want, but you probably just leave it as the default. Now if I go build, I usually, in this window, it should bring up, it's actually temp because this is the tutorial project. I normally make...
build a folder because it dumps so much stuff into it.
Yeah, so I normally make a folder called builds, and once it's added that, I usually also add another folder for the version that I'm building. So whatever this is called, like 1.1.2 preview.1, I think it was called. So select that folder, and it should start building my game. Now, this can take forever, depending on what you've got in the game. I'm actually, yeah, it is, okay, it's building, cool. So, while it's doing this, it's doing stuff like, it's stripping away anything that's in your project folder that you've not actually added to the game. With exceptions, but that's probably not important right now. It's doing stuff like, currently it's building shaders, so it's taking all the shader files and it's compiling them. It does stuff like, if you've got lighting in your game, it will take the light maps, so light maps are like baked lighting. It takes that lighting information and it compresses it, I think. It does stuff like that, so this is packaging everything, compressing it, and it's also building the executable. So yeah, it's stripping away all of the Unity code that isn't being used. So for example, if I didn't use any physics in my game, I believe it strips out the physics engine code. It's making your executable as small as it can be. So as you can see, it takes forever. But the smaller your game, like, the less time it takes, of course. If you've got like a game that's gigabytes of assets, then it's gonna take, you know, a few minutes.
So before you play, I wanna show you something off, but after it's built.
Yeah. The only problem here is while it's building, I can't actually do anything in the rest of the editor. So we're gonna have to kind of be patient and wait for this to complete building. So if there's anything that you want to show up in the meantime, I suppose if Joshua, you can share your screen.
Well, I mean, it's on the same tutorial, so.
Okay. I suppose when I upload this recording, I'll try and cut out a lot of this bit because it's just looking at loading files. This is where I'd normally go make myself a drink, like a cup of tea or something. Oh, it's done. There we go. That was quicker than I actually thought it would be. Right, so it brings up the game for you. So as we call it, Super Amazing Shooty Boy, because I'm terrible.
See the little left as well.
Yeah, so if you look very carefully, I don't know how well it comes across on the stream, but it's got our little gun icon that we put there. Yeah, sorry, was there something you wanted to do before?
You load it up, go back to the editor and play in the editor.
Sure, if I just close these windows down. So play here.
So if you press tab, and then frame rate counter, turn that on.
Oh, yep.
And if we just... I don't know how well it will play, but we're trying to like about 100 frames, like 70 to 100.
I actually don't know what happens when you die. It just kind of goes dark. You lose! Okay, cool.
So then, Now if we load it up in the build.
Right, so I mean, you can also get the frame rate counter from the stats window, right? If you want.
Yeah, but I was doing it from the in-game one to make.
Yeah, you want it more accurate. Yeah. So, to make it comparable, right? Oh, I see what you're doing. Yeah. If we play it, so you just click the executable. If you're, thanks, Avast. It's gonna like close this down and reopen it in a second. Just give it like 5 seconds. Honestly, antivirus software this is always like way more problem than it's worth. But let's board our game up. It's actually not even letting us resize it, so this is going to be really tiny on the recording. If we go play, if you wanted to do the same thing, so tab, frame rate counter. Yeah, there we go. Now it's 400 and something.
So in the editor, it's much laggier because it has to do with all the editor overhead and the fact that you can like change stuff in the editor.
Yeah.
Which is why it was like 4 times slower.
Yeah. So yeah, I believe it's still the case that the entire Unity editor is running in a single thread. So not only when you have the editor open, not only are you like playing the game. I don't exactly know how it works, but I don't think it compiles everything. So I think parts of it are interpreted, which makes it slower. And it's also running the editor in the background on the same thread. You end up with way lower performance. But that's not a problem, because you won't be distributing that to people anyway. When you built the game, it's super slow.
The editor that it's really slow.
Yeah.
Try building it, seeing if it's still slow.
Yeah.
In the build version.
Yeah, so kind of playing things in the Unity editor just gives you an idea of what the game will play like. It's not perfect. I actually don't know how.
I mean, there will be a time when, if you make a sufficiently complex game, the only way to really try it will be to have to build it over and over again.
Yeah, I feel as if, yeah, if you've got a huge game, like, it will probably run. You know, if it was obviously going to run much slower in the editor. Yeah, to get the true experience of your game, it's always going to be the case of running it. The built version is going to give you what it will actually be like to play. So yeah, you're right in that there might be cases where it might be unplayable. Sorry, it might be unplayable in the Unity editor, but then you'll have to build it.
Might be worth looking for a way to shove it onto another thread or run it like independently or something.
I mean, if you do unit tests in the editor, so if you do separate parts in the editor, test those first, and then only build when you're combining everything together.
Yeah.
That'll make it easier to test. Because you can add random scenes to the editor and then not add them to the build. So you can have like test scenes.
Yeah.
So if you make like a massive game like The Witcher or something, you don't want to like test it with all the environment models because that'll be really laggy. So if you make like a separate scene that's like just for movement testing, that just has like very basic obstacles in, then you can test it in the editor, so you don't have to like go through the massive process of building it.
Yeah, if you're testing just small bits, small changes, then you know, yeah, you don't have to add it to this. Like, you know, if you had like a huge open world map and you just wanted to test like a change to, I don't know, a gun, then trying to test it in your huge level might not be what you want. You might want to make a little test scene. Are there any additional questions that people have? Because I think we've covered the basics of this built-in tutorial now. If there's anything specific that people want us to move on to, then we can, but because there's like so many things in Unity you can kind of play around with and talk about.
mean, next week we're gonna try to do another tutorial.
Yeah.
Of like probably like starting from scratch and like basic coding.
Yeah. Yeah, because I feel we've kind of used other assets that exist here, so it's probably not like, yeah, we've not started from scratch, which is going to be quite useful. And actually, after this session's ended, we are going to put out kind of a little survey about events that like members want us to run, and that will include a selection of things that we can do tutorials specifically in Unity for. So we'll have a list of so stuff like, you know, scripting, C# scripting. We can do like particle systems. I can't remember what's on the list now off the top of my head. Mine's blank, but yeah. Basically, if you want us to go in depth on a topic in particular, then we can do that. But I think next week is going to be just here's how to make things from scratch, as Joshua says.
I mean, does anyone have any questions about what we've covered? Just have any questions in general.
Yeah.
Answer. Have anything you want to show off?
As if everyone is happy so far with what we talked about. Oh, sorry, go on.
I'll comment that was pretty good, and I feel like I should be paying for it, but no.
Oh, thank you. Well, if you feel like you've learned something, then great. Thank you. Like, good. Yeah, this is our first time kind of doing these taught sessions. It's something that as a society we've kind of talked about doing so many times, like so many years in a row. We did actually try game maker tutorials a few years back, but it was kind of like just one of the sessions. I think they were useful. It's just kind of committing time to doing these is a little bit tricky. But I think this year we want to kind of knuckle down on it and just say, yeah, we're doing these tutorials every week. It should be hopefully something new every week to build on what we've learned so far. Yeah. I mean, if you want us to do tutorials for things that are not specifically Unity, then we might be able to do something. Like, you know, there's parts of game development that are not just, you know, playing around in the Unity editor. So if you wanted to create assets yourself, then, you know, you'll be working in maybe Blender if you're making 3D models, or maybe like Photoshop or something similar to Photoshop if you're making 2D art. But then that might require a little bit more time on our part to put together a tutorial for that kind of stuff. So, you know, if you do want stuff like that, then just let us know. I guess we can't exactly promise a tutorial on anything in particular, but, you know, we'll only know if that's something you want if you let us know, so we'll try our best to... if we can't do it, we'll try and find someone who can. But if people are happy with this so far, then I think I'll end the recording and we can just revert to general workshop mode. Doesn't sound like there's any objections to that, so thanks for coming. I hope you've pieced together the basics.